Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Assalamu alaikum students, how are you? I hope you all are well. I am your English teacher. Students, today we are going to start chapter number 8, Emily Leaves Home. This is first session of this chapter. Students, in this chapter we will learn about David's stay at Steelforth's home and how did Emily leave home and why. We will also learn about the David's meeting with Ham and Mr. Peggotty because they were worried about Emily. Students, in the previous chapter we read about David and Steelforth's meeting. Steelforth told David about his visit to Yarmouth. When David told Steelforth about his desire to visit Yarmouth, Steelforth said, "Don't go for a few days. Come home with me and stay as long as you can with us. We may never meet again." Okay, students, let's start the chapter. Students, as usual, first I'll read a paragraph, then I'll explain it. And before explaining, I'll tell you meaning of difficult words. Let's begin. Emily leaves home. David says goodbye to Steelforth. I mentioned to Mr. Spanlaw that I wanted to go away for a short time. As I was not being paid, it was not difficult to arrange this. Mrs. Steerforth was pleased to see me, and so was Rosa Dartle. Though I did not know why, Miss Dartle watched me particularly carefully. I noticed this when I had only been in the house for about an hour. Students, mention means refer to something briefly and without going into a detail. Pleased means feeling or showing pleasure and satisfaction, especially at an event or a situation. Students, this paragraph states that David told to Mr. Spanlaw he wanted to go away for a short time. As David was learning there, he was not a paid employee of Mr. Spanlaw, so it was not difficult for him to take leave for few days. Students, you all must have understood where David wanted to go. Yes, he wanted to visit Steerforth as he invited David to stay at his home as long as David can. When David reached his home, Mrs. Steerforth was so happy to see David, and Miss Dartle was also happy to see David. David couldn't understand why did she happy. David also noticed that Miss Dartle was watching him very carefully. He had only been in the house for about an hour. Let's move on. We all four went out for a walk in the afternoon. Rosa Dartle seized my arm with her thin hand and held me back. When Steerforth and his mother had walked on and could not hear, she turned and looked straight at me. I saw the mark of the old wound stretch until it reached the lip which had been cut very badly. This mark and her bright eyes as she looked at me almost frightened me. She said, "What is he doing?" Students, this paragraph states that after an hour of David's arrival at Steerforth's home, they all means Steerforth, his mother, Miss Rosa Dartle, and David went for a walk in the afternoon. When Steerforth and his mother had walked on and they were enough away from David and Miss Dartle seized David's arm in her thin hands, and she turned and looked straight in David's eyes. She asked to him about Steerforth, that what is he doing? When she turned towards David, he saw her wound mark. David was frightened from her bright eyes and her wound mark. Let's move on. She said this with an eagerness that seemed to burn like fire in her. Is he angry or proud or in love? What is he feeling? Miss Dartle, I replied, I do not know of any way in which Steerforth has changed since I first came here. I hardly understand what you mean. You must never tell anyone about this conversation, she said in a quick, fierce way. She said no more. Students, eagerness means enthusiasm to do or to have something, keenness. Seemed means give the impression of being something or having a particular quality. Fierce means having or displaying an intense or ferocious aggressiveness, very extremely. This paragraph states that when Miss Dartle asked David about Steerforth, he felt she asked very eagerly, as fire is burnt in her. She more asked about his feeling. Is he angry or proud or in love? David replied he didn't know. Why has Steerforth changed? He also said, I hardly understand. What do you mean? Miss Dartle strictly instructed David not to tell anyone about their conversation. Let's move on. There was something else about Miss Dartle I must not forget to mention. Steerforth had made an effort to please her and be a pleasant companion. It needed great skill to do this. I saw her try more and more weakly to refuse his friendship. At first, she seemed angry that he had so much power over her. Then I saw her smile gently as we sat by the fire. We talked and laughed together as if we were children. Students, pleasant means giving a sense of happy satisfaction or enjoyment. Companion means a person or animal with whom one spends a lot of time or with whom one travels. Gently means with a mild kind or tender manner. This paragraph states that David felt strangely while he talked to Miss Dartle. Steerforth was trying to make her happy and be a pleasant companion. He was doing this very skillfully. David noticed she was trying to refuse Steerforth's friendship very weakly. First, she was looking angry, but after some time David noticed her gentle smile. Then they sat by the fire and talked and laughed together, as they were children. During this period, David noticed that Steerforth had much power over Miss Dartle. Okay, students, let's move towards next paragraph. Don't get up, said Steerforth. She had at last decided to go to bed. My dear Rosa, don't get up. Be kind for once and sing us a song. Let me sit and listen as I used to do. She sang wildly and with great feeling. Her low voice and the music seemed to express all she felt and thought. I imagined I was dreaming. A minute later, Steerforth went over to her and put his arm round her shoulders. He was laughing as he said, See, Rosa, we still love each other very much. Suddenly she hit him and pushed him away from her in great anger, like a wild beast. She rushed out of the room. Students, wildly means in a way that lacks discipline or restraint. Wild beast means a contemptible person or something formidably difficult to control or deal with. Rush means move with urgent haste. This paragraph states that when Miss Dartle decided to go to bed, Steerforth requested her don't get up and sing a song. He said he wanted to listen as he used to do. Miss Rosa sang a song angrily. Her song was expressing her feelings and thoughts. Steerforth tried to make fun of her feelings with his vulgar attitude, so Rosa hit him and pushed him away in great anger, and she hastily went out of the room. Okay, students, let's move on. What is the matter with Rosa? Said Mrs. Steerforth, coming in. She has been good and sweet, mother, for a little while, so now she must be the opposite, replied Steerforth. Rosa did not come back. Steerforth laughed about what had happened. He asked me if I had ever seen anyone so strange and fierce. I told him I was surprised at her behavior. I asked if he could guess what had suddenly made her so unhappy. Students, this paragraph states that when Rosa Dartle was moving angrily from the room, Mrs. Steerforth, who was coming in, asked, "What is the matter with Rosa?" Steerforth told to his mother she behaved as a good and sweet person for a little time, so now she must be the opposite. He wanted to say that Rosa's attitude was her habit. It was not new for them. He was laughing on what had happened between him and Rosa. Rosa Dartle didn't come back. Steerforth asked to David whether he had ever seen anyone so fierce and strange like Rosa. David replied, "I was so surprised at her behavior." He also asked to Steerforth what had suddenly made her so unhappy. Let's move on. "Oh, I don't know at all," said he. "She watches everything and everyone. She's dangerous." Good night, my dear Steerforth," said I. "I shall have to leave before you wake up in the morning. Good night." He was unwilling to let me go. "David, if for any reason we should be separated, think of me kindly." "I always do, Steerforth," said I. "I always love you and treasure you." Students, treasure means keep carefully a valuable or valued item or value highly. This paragraph states that when David asked Steerforth what had suddenly made Rosa unhappy, Steerforth replied, "I don't know. She is very dangerous. She watches everything and everyone." Then David said good night to Steerforth and said he will go early morning. Steerforth didn't want David to leave. He also said to David if for any reason they should be separated, David remember him kindly. David replied, "Of course, I always do." He more said, "I always love you and you are very valuable for me." Okay, students, let's move on. Good night, David, and goodbye. We shook hands and we separated. I looked into his room in the morning, but he was asleep. He slept with his head on his arm, as I had often seen him sleep at school, and thus in the silence of the early morning I left him. Students, this paragraph states that they said goodbye to each other. They shook hands and separated. Next morning when David woke up, he went to Steerforth's room, but he was sleeping. He was sleeping like as he slept in his childhood. David left from Steerforth's house in the early morning. Okay students, now I'll explain today's lesson in Urdu. डेविड ने मिस्टर स्पेनलॉ को इन्फॉर्म किया
کہ وہ کچھ ٹائم کے لیے کہیں جانا چاہتا ہے. چونکہ وہ مسٹر اسپینلو کا پیڈ امپلائی نہیں تھا لہٰذا اسے کوئی مشکل نہیں ہوئی. مسز اسٹیو فورتھ ڈیوڈ کو دیکھ کر بہت خوش ہوئی اور مس ڈارٹل بھی. مس ڈارٹل ڈیوڈ کا بہت کیئرفلی جائزہ لے رہی تھی. اس کے بعد وہ چاروں یعنی مسٹر اسٹیو فورتھ ڈیوڈ مسز اسٹیو فورتھ اور مس ڈارٹل واک کے لیے چلے گئے. جب اسٹیو فورتھ اور اس کی مدر آگے چلے گئے تو مس ڈارٹل نے ڈیوڈ کا ہاتھ پکڑا اور اپنی طرف ٹرن کر کے اسٹیو فورتھ کے بارے میں پوچھا کہ وہ آج کل کیا کر رہا ہے. مس ڈارٹل نے بہت ایگرلی ڈیوڈ سے پوچھا. اس نے مزید کہا کہ وہ کیا محسوس کر رہا ہے, کیا وہ غصہ ہے یا کیا وہ کسی کو پسند کرنے لگا ہے یا پھر وہ کسی بات پر بہت پراؤڈ ہے. ڈیوڈ نے مس ڈارٹل کو جواب دیا کہ مجھے نہیں معلوم کہ اسٹیو فورتھ کس وجہ سے چینج ہوا ہے. مس ڈارٹل نے مزید کہا کہ اس کنورسیشن کے بارے میں ڈیوڈ کسی کو نہ بتائے. اسٹیو فورتھ ایک اچھے ساتھی کی حیثیت سے مس ڈارٹل کو خوش کرنے کی کوشش کر رہا تھا. ڈیوڈ نے نوٹ کیا کہ مس ڈارٹل پر اسٹیو فورتھ کا بہت انفلوئنس ہے. وہ لوگ فائر کے پاس بیٹھ گئے, باتیں کرنے لگے. مس ڈارٹل جب سونے کے لیے جانے لگی تو اسٹیو فورتھ نے ان سے ریکویسٹ کی کہ وہ ایک گانا سنائے اور وہ بیٹھ کر سنے گا جیسے وہ پہلے سنتا تھا. مس ڈارٹل نے ایک سانگ سنایا جو کہ ان کی فیلنگز اور ان کے خیالات کو بیان کر رہا تھا. اگلے ہی لمحے اسٹیو فورتھ نے مس ڈارٹل سے مس بہیو کیا تو وہ اسے دھکا دے کر چلی گئی. جب وہ جا رہی تھی تو مسز اسٹیو فورتھ جو کہ روم میں انٹر ہو رہی تھی انہوں نے پوچھا کہ روزا کے ساتھ کیا مسئلہ ہے. اسٹیو فورتھ نے جواب دیا کہ اس نے کچھ دیر کے لیے سویٹلی بہیو کیا تھا لہٰذا اب وہ لازمی اس کے اپوزٹ ہی بہیو کرے گی. روزا دوبارہ واپس نہیں آئی اور جو کچھ ہوا تھا اس کو سوچ کر اسٹیو فورتھ ہنسنے لگا. اس نے ڈیوڈ سے پوچھا کہ تم نے کبھی اس سے زیادہ اسٹرینج اور خوفناک شخص دیکھا ہے؟ ڈیوڈ نے کہا میں مس روزا کے بیہیویئر پر حیران ہوں. اس نے اچانک ایسا کیوں بہیو کیا اور کس چیز نے انہیں اتنا انہیپی بہیو کرنے پر مجبور کیا؟ اسٹیو فورتھ نے جواب دیا آئی ڈونٹ نو, وہ بہت خطرناک ہے. اس کے بعد ڈیوڈ نے کہا گڈ نائٹ, میں تمہارے صبح اٹھنے سے پہلے چلا جاؤں گا. اسٹیو فورتھ نہیں چاہتا تھا کہ ڈیوڈ ابھی وہاں سے جائے. اس نے ڈیوڈ سے کہا کہ اگر ہم کبھی الگ ہو جائیں تو تم میرے بارے میں کائنڈلی سوچنا. ڈیوڈ نے جواب دیا میں ہمیشہ ایسا ہی کروں گا, تم میرے لیے بہت اہم ہو اینڈ آئی آلویز لو یو. اس کے بعد وہ ہاتھ ملا کر سونے کے لیے چلے گئے. اگلی صبح ڈیوڈ اٹھا. اس نے اسٹیو فورتھ کے روم میں دیکھا تو وہ ابھی تک سو رہا تھا. وہ اسی طرح اپنے بازو پر سر رکھ کر سو رہا تھا جیسے وہ اسکول کے زمانے میں سوتا تھا اور پھر خاموشی سے ڈیوڈ وہاں سے چلا گیا. Okay students, now move towards words meaning of this chapter. Students, you can see the words meaning of list of this chapter on your screen. I am going to read these words meaning. Read with me. Mention, it means write or speak about or to refer to. Particularly means especially. Seize means stop or take hold of. Eagerness means showing interest or desire. Conversation means informal talk. Express means show or make known an opinion. Wild beast means animal not tamed. Students, you can see the question number 1 of this chapter on your screen. Question is, what did Rosa ask David about Steve Forth when they went out for a walk? Yes students, we read it today. Yes, Rosa asked whether Steve Forth was angry or proud or as to what he was doing. Was he in love with her? Students, read today's lesson thoroughly. First make title page and index, then do words meaning and question number 1 in your English literature copy. Inshallah, we will continue this chapter in the next session. Thank you. Till then, take care of yourself and your family. Allah Hafiz.